Welcome back, learners, to another e-learning session from BrainPulley. And today's topic is JavaScript. This is part of the bigger package, that is the Introduction to World Wide Web Technologies. So, for JavaScript, just to mention, we have a prerequisite that you should know basics of HTML and CSS and how does the HTTP or World Wide Web, how does it works, the basics. So if you have not already seen the other lecture videos, I will strongly suggest that please go back, check HTML and CSS first and then come back. So what is JavaScript? So there, if you have attended the last sessions, we have learned how does a web server and a client or a browser works. So whenever there is a request or a request for a service or a request for a data, browser sends the request to the server using HTTP or HTTPS, and then the server processes the request. If it is an active server page, if it is a web application, it will process, it will check the previous context, like are you a logged in user or what are the data available on the database, and it will send you back again after creating a complete HTML page, or in some cases it can be a XML page or some other kind of data. It will send it back and then browser will decode it and present it. So that is how the traditionally all the websites used to be. So like right from very beginning, the websites were like this only. So there were so initially there were these static pages which were like written, hard coded by hand and saved on the server, linked with each another using the ankle A tags, and then people used to just go and fetch the data. Then there comes server technologies where people had started putting programming languages on the server which will generate the data on the fly, and then whatever you can want, the service you want, the data you want, you send a request, it will process at the server side and send back. But with that there was a big problem. One of the problem was the pages were always static, what the user can see, and for every request or every interaction there was a request back to the server. Like you cannot do anything on the client side. So to solve this problem, so the JavaScript was introduced. So what does it does is, it is a scripting language. It's a programming language where we can write some programs, some logic, and it runs on the client side. So it's a lightweight interpreted programming language. So JavaScript is not compiled, it is interpreted, and it is actually transferred to the browser. So what happens is, say we have a browser and through internet we are connected to a web server. So the browser sends the requests and browser returns HTML. And with this HTML, the server also returns JavaScript. Like as we have seen previous sessions, that we can use CSS to design the page. So with this request, we actually not only pull HTML pages, we also pull CSS documents. So along that, we can also get JavaScript. So how to put this JavaScript or where to put, we will cover shortly. But we actually receive the JavaScript back on the browser, and then we run it on the browser. Whereas if you have attended other sessions like PHP, you might have known that PHP runs on the server. So whatever the request we send, PHP runs within the server. PHP runs within the server and we get only clean HTML out of it. But with JavaScript, we get the JavaScript to the browser. PHP runs within the server. The PHP runs within the server and we get only clean HTML out of it. But with JavaScript, we get the JavaScript to the browser. And we run it on the client or on the browser. That's why it's also known as client-side scripting language. So what is the advantage of client-side scripting language? Number one, we can run it on the client. So we don't have to do everything on the server, or we don't have to always communicate with the server to and fro. And second thing is, definitely this is a big advantage. Because of this, now our page can be more interactive. Because in a server-side programming language, so as I mentioned, initially pages were like very initially, the web pages were just text. There was nothing on it, only matter was there. And then there were browsers like Mosaic. There was something called Mosaic, and there are some early web browsers which were not even graphical. They were text, like the old softwares, which has console-based software, black and white. And so then people started creating more visual web browsers. The initials were Netscape, the Internet Explorer. These are the few of the softwares, web browsers which came at very initially. So they added things like graphics, colors, fonts, and there was actually a war. There was something, if you look at the internet history, there was something called as the browser war. And while they were adding features, some browser started with Netscape, they added a way for the developer to embed a script so that can be run on the client side. And initially it was known as ECMAScript. It was initially known as ECMAScript, ECMA, and Microsoft has also came up with one of his script which he called as VBScript. So VBScript, its original form was very much similar to Visual Basic, and that's how Microsoft started his own client-side scripting called VBScript. And ECMAScript was actually, there was a company called ECMA, and it was collaborating with Netscape, and they had came up with this script, ECMAScript, which is more or less, which was similar to C or C++. Then there came a refined version of ECMAScript that was known as JScript. So they called it JScript because now the syntax was more or less similar to Java. It seemed like Java. And then when it was further developed both by Microsoft and Netscape, and it was accepted to a wider audience, people didn't use VBScript much, and there were more browsers like Mozilla, Opera, and other browsers that came. So they all jointly developed something called JavaScript, the JavaScript. But it is called JavaScript only because of its resemblance with the language Java. But other than that, it has to do nothing with Java. It is a unique language in its own, and it has no relation with Java. So that was what is Java. It's a programming code that can be inserted into a web page, and it can run on the browser. So let's move forward. Okay, cool. So we talked so much about JavaScript, but how to start using it? So as I mentioned, JavaScripts are run on browser, and they always exist with the HTML. So that's where it actually runs. So to run this, we need an HTML document. How to write an HTML document? Last time we have seen that we can use Notepad, Notepad++, or any other HTML editor. Adobe Dreamweaver is a very good example of editor. It is very intelligent. Microsoft has a lot of HTML editing tools like Visual Studio or Microsoft Web Matrix, and there are more open source variations also, both for Windows and non-Windows platform. So you can use any typical text editor and create a HTML document. So we have a HTML document. It will have every aspect of a normal HTML document. Wherever I want to put interactivity, or within the page, wherever I want to do some logic or run some code, I use a special tag that is known as script, ankle script, open and close. In between, whatever I will write will be processed by a component in web browser known as JavaScript Interpreter. It will interpret line by line and run it. So let's have a look at it as a demo.